At my son's engagement party, his fiancée's parents whispered, "He comes from a broken home." My son tried to defend me, but I stopped him. 2 days later, they found out whose company was sponsoring their wedding. Chapter 1: The toast that shattered something. I stood near the back of the garden patio, just under the string lights, holding a glass of lemonade that had long since gone warm. The engagement party was in full swing. Laughter rose from the rented floral arches. Waiters floated by with trays of champagne. Her parents were the center of it all, sleek, confident, the kind of couple who wore their wealth like perfume, subtle but unmistakable. My son Aaron was glowing. And who could blame him? The woman he loved had said yes. Her family was throwing a celebration that looked more like a miniature wedding. And everything, from the decor to the matching cutlery, screamed upward momentum. And me? I stood in an off-the-rack blazer from 2 years ago, shoes polished by hand that morning. I didn't mind. I didn't come here to impress anyone. But I didn't expect what came next. I overheard it by accident. I had stepped closer to the refreshments table when her mother leaned toward her husband and whispered, just loud enough for me to catch, "He's sweet, but you know he comes from a broken home." Her father chuckled under his breath. "Let's just pray the bloodline doesn't carry." My fingers tightened around the glass. For a second I forgot to breathe. They were talking about me, and about my son. Aaron must have caught the shift in my face. He stepped over quickly, his hand brushing my shoulder. "Dad. Everything okay?" I smiled gently. "Everything's fine." He followed my gaze, and realized. His face darkened. He turned toward her parents. "Did you just?" I stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Aaron," I said quietly. "Not here." "But." I gave the smallest shake of my head. "Not here," I repeated. He held my eyes for a long second. His jaw clenched. Then, he nodded. Because he knew me. Knew that when I went silent, truly silent, something was building. And I wouldn't interrupt their perfect little evening. Not now. I would let them have their flowers and lights and champagne. Let them think they'd insulted a nobody. Because 2 days from now, they'd learn something else. They'd learn exactly whose name was behind every bottle, every bouquet, every invoice paid. And this time, it wouldn't be whispered. It would be announced. 2 days later, the world kept spinning. But something small had shifted. The engagement party was over. The champagne flutes were rinsed. The rental company had come and gone. And her parents, Annalise's parents, had resumed their lives in their curated bubble of wealth, etiquette, and unchallenged assumptions. They hadn't thought about me since. I was just the father from a broken home. A man politely tolerated in photos but gently erased from the narrative. Their kind of people didn't remember men like me. But invoices did. So did contracts. Especially the one that covered the venue, the catering, the musicians, the valet service, and the entire floral dome centerpiece that Annalise's mother had insisted be imported overnight. That was the thing about silence. It could echo louder than pride. A knock on the door. Annalise's father opened it to find a deliveryman holding a small envelope. He frowned. "Yes. Billing copy, sir." Final itemized summary, marked urgent. The man barely glanced at it before waving the courier off. But as he walked back inside, flipping it open, his steps slowed. Then stopped. His wife called from the kitchen. "Who was it?" He didn't respond. He just stared at the crisp white document in his hand. There, printed at the bottom of the formal letterhead, beneath the itemized total and the gold logo that adorned every vendor they'd used, was a name. My name. Hayden Marcus. Founder. H. Marcus Holdings. Right below it. Proud sponsor of this event via affiliate partnership with Bluestone Events. The same Bluestone Events that had coordinated everything. Every chair. Every glass. Every bite of lobster tartar. They hadn't just accepted my presence at the party. They had accepted my money. They hadn't just mocked a broken home. They had toasted under lights I paid for, listened to music I covered, and raised their glasses, unknowingly, to a man whose name they had erased from their family photo. Until now. because today, it was on paper. Tomorrow it would be on a plaque. And soon, it would be in front of the entire guest list again. But this time, they wouldn't be smiling. Chapter 3. The Wall with My Name. 3 weeks later, the wedding walkthrough began. Annalisa's mother floated across the venue like a pageant queen reborn, directing staff to adjust ivory ribbons and checking the floral arch for symmetry. Her father trailed behind, clipboard in hand, absorbed in logistics. But his mood was off. He hadn't smiled since the invoice. Still no one spoke of it. Not to each other. Not to me. And certainly not to my son. They dismissed the whole thing as coincidence. A fluke. Surely, they told themselves, a man like him couldn't be behind something as exclusive as this estate. Except I was. The venue wasn't just any ballroom. It was mine. 5 years ago, I had quietly purchased the abandoned estate, and spent millions restoring it into a premier event space. It opened last year under a different name. A boutique brand under my real estate portfolio. And nobody in their circle had ever looked behind the curtain. Why would they? People like me weren't supposed to own castles. We were supposed to fix their driveways. But today, that changed. As guests arrived for the final walkthrough, a private tour was offered, showcasing the venue's recent renovations. A tour guide, cheerful and poised, led them past original artwork into the grand library hall and through the East Wing reception area. At the far end stood a plaque. New. Unveiled just last night. It was bronze, elegant, gleaming under the chandelier light. The group paused as the guide smiled proudly. This wing was made possible by a personal endowment from our founder, Mr. Hayden Marcus. Silence. Not the polite kind. The kind that crawls under your collar and chokes. Annalisa's mother turned pale. Her father clenched the clipboard. A few relatives exchanged puzzled glances. And my son. He looked directly at me from across the room. Confusion in his eyes. He didn't know either. Not yet. I nodded once, calmly. He'd find out soon enough. The same way his fiancée's entire family just had. Through actions, not arguments. Through legacy. Not labels. Chapter 4. The speech they didn't expect. The ballroom was bathed in amber light that evening. Guests filtered in through carved oak doors, welcomed by violins and champagne flutes. A massive engagement sign shimmered near the stage, flanked by gold leaf banners and cascading roses. The energy was upscale, perfect, and painfully artificial. I stood alone near the back. No name tag. No title. Just a quiet smile. Like always. Annalisa's parents, dressed like royalty, floated across the room again. Her mother beamed. Her father offered rehearsed handshakes. But something behind their eyes had changed since the tour. The plaque had rattled them. But they hadn't said a word. They assumed, hoped, I would stay silent. I almost did. Until my son stood at the podium. He tapped the mic gently. "Thank you all for being here," he said, voice trembling slightly. "This means the world to us. Anne. I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone important. Someone most of you don't know well." He looked directly at me. "Dad, would you mind coming up here?" A ripple passed through the room. Me. Annalisa's mother stiffened. Her father whispered something sharp into her ear. I walked slowly. No rush. No nerves. Just a man walking into his moment. With 20 years of buried hurt under his coat. I took the mic, looked at my son. Then looked at the room. "I was told once," I began, "that men like me don't belong in places like this. That coming from a broken home makes you somehow unworthy." A few faces looked away. Others froze. "I was told," I continued, "that fixing cars for a living meant I couldn't possibly contribute to something grand. That I'd never stand shoulder to shoulder with people who build things that matter." I paused. The silence was full now. Not awkward, but heavy. 5 years ago, I purchased this estate. 2 years ago, I built the science and engineering wing at Westbrook University. And this month, our company became the primary sponsor for this wedding. Gasps. Visible gasps. My voice stayed calm. So to those of you who once whispered that I wasn't family enough, don't worry. I don't hold grudges. I looked at my son. I just build things. Quietly. Permanently. And when the time is right, I let the brick speak. Dead silence. Then, applause. It didn't start loud, just a few claps from the back. But it grew. Like rain on a tin roof. Until half the room stood and the other half looked like they wanted to disappear. Annalise's parents. They didn't clap. They didn't even blink. Because for the first time in their lives, they realized status wasn't measured by labels, but by legacy. And that's something you can't fake. The invoice they never saw. The party wore on. Laughter returned, but not from the same mouths. The whispers shifted. Once about me, now about them. Annalise's father kept glancing at me from the edge of the dance floor. A bead of sweat clung to his hairline, even in the air-conditioned glow of the chandeliers. Her mother pretended to mingle, but never strayed more than 3 feet from him. They were waiting. Waiting for a confrontation. Waiting for me to gloat. But I didn't. I danced once with the bride-to-be. Hugged my son, and kept my distance, smiling quietly from the corner, the same way they had ignored me at the engagement announcement. Until it was time. The wedding planner approached their table. She was holding a white envelope, thick and neatly sealed with gold wax. "Excuse me," she said softly, handing it to Annalise's father. "As requested. The sponsor's itemized invoice and tax forms. For your records." His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it. His eyes scanned the first line. Then stopped. He blinked. "Read it again." The document was simple. Invoice reference. Full wedding sponsorship. Donor, Jonathan M. Reed. Position. CEO, Reed Tech Industries. Payment date, 9 months before engagement. Total covered, $278,000, including venue, catering, staff bonuses, floral contracts, and foundation donation in Annalise's name. He looked up slowly. Right at me. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Not a defense. Not a thank you. Not even denial. His world had flipped on paper, an entire event built on the illusion of his control. Paid for by the men he tried to erase from the narrative. I didn't speak. Didn't wave. Just nodded once. And walked out the same way I came in. Unnoticed by many. Unforgettable to the few who mattered. Epilogue. The men she thanked first. 3 weeks after the engagement party, a letter arrived at my home. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter. Handwritten. Cream stationery. Sealed with a wax stamp in rose gold. The return address was my son's. I opened it slowly, expecting a thank you note. Maybe something polite and safe. But the first line stopped me cold. "Mr. Reed, I'm sorry I didn't call you Dad that night." Her handwriting was elegant, slightly slanted. The kind that carried intention behind every curve. She wrote about how ashamed she was of her parents' comment that night. How she'd heard them whisper versions of it before. How she'd told them to stop. She said she didn't know the full story until she saw that invoice. Until her father's face turned white. Until she finally understood who had made her dream wedding even possible. Not the men who judged me from a country club membership. But the men who rebuilt engines with his bare hands and quietly funded everything. You didn't have to love me like your own. But you did. You didn't have to step back when others took credit. But you did. You didn't have to stay that night. But you did. At the bottom, she signed it. With all the respect they never gave you. Your daughter-in-law, Annalise. I folded the letter slowly, set it on the table beside my morning coffee. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself a small smile that wasn't laced with regret or bitterness. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about being seen. Being valued. And being called something no one else had ever thought to say out loud. Dad. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. If you are watching this video, comment below and tell us where you are watching this video from. Hit like if you crave justice. And share this story with someone who needs its fire.